Next up, take a look at this. Missile comes down, airstrike. Again, we have little plumes of smoke, but you know, this doesn't look like the first explosion we saw. Why is it that we have bursts of smoke coming from the left, from the right, and from up top right there? Well, it's because it's being pushed out from that building. It's kind of hard to see, but if we scrub just a tiny bit right there, we could see really quickly that the reason why that shape is broken up so much is because of the fact that the explosion is interacting with the shape of the house. So it's actually coming out of the sides. It's coming out right there. It's coming out to the right as well. So this again goes back to the whole idea that if you have collisions for that initial impact, that can greatly shape the resulting explosion and make it a lot more different and interesting as well. Yet again, spikes sort of come after the fact usually. We do have this debris flying down, so that's pretty cool looking. And so we definitely will have debris. That debris is pulling the smoke away from the plume. It technically isn't correct to say that the debris is making all the smoke right here. It's probably more accurate to say that the debris is pulling the density from that main plume. So that might also influence some of the decisions we make when we have debris going through the plume. Is it going to actually emit all the smoke, or is it going to pull it from the cloud itself? A big difference right there. And as this evolves, the shapes are really interesting because of that initial explosion. And we don't have a whole lot of color variation here, but you could always add more color variation if you wanted to. Again, I'd like to really repeat the point here that with this hit, look at what makes this feel like it hit hard. Look at how much space the fireball is about to take in the frame in literally 1 or 2 frames. Like watch, boom. It's taking up probably, well, about half the frame in total. And so because of the fact that we see that many bright pixels, to us, it feels like it hit really, really hard. That's a nice little hack that makes any pyro explosion feel bigger. So right there. And also, there's usually some kind of delay from the missile hitting to the camera shake. So we need to be sure to time that appropriately as well. Again, spikes come after the main plume. We have all this falling debris that makes a big difference. And yet again, if we take up a lot of our visual space with that fire plume, it's going to feel really big, like that. Also, I want to mention, and this is a good observation, that another thing that makes this explosion feel really big is the camera angle. Notice how we're looking up at this explosion. A lot of times, if you have like helicopter footage or something like that of large explosions, it just doesn't feel very big. It doesn't feel like it hit very hard because you're looking down. But from the ground, looking up, all of a sudden, it just feels like a massive hit right here. If you saw that from a helicopter, it wouldn't look nearly as large and impressive. Also, just take a look at all that debris. My gosh, it's taking up so much space in the frame. And so these tiny little particles, these tiny little bits of debris make a very, very big difference to the chaos and the chaotic feeling of an explosion. And that matters a lot as well. I happen to know that this footage is showing a missile that's designed to explode an underground bunker. So they actually have an underground bunker here on this mountain. And look at what happens to the shape of that explosion as a result. I mean, if you were to stop right here and think, okay, what's the shape going to be? You'd probably think, well, there's not a whole lot of debris around here. You probably think, okay, standard mushroom cloud, right? Maybe a few rocks, a few spears. But look what happens. As this evolves, look at how unique that mushroom cloud shape is. It's definitely not your default shelf explosion right there. And that's because Again, it went underground. The reason why it has these different shapes is because it was colliding with something that changed the direction of those plumes as it went out. And so that makes, again, a huge difference in making these shapes look unique. Back to a metal example, look at the shape of the debris when this hits. We kind of have this spiky little puff going on, a nice combination of fireball and smoke, but really it's the debris that makes this whole thing feel pretty impactful, right? I mean, and the camera shake as well. Combination of the camera shake, the debris, the fire itself, this is really great footage right here. Now taking on a bit more of an aerial perspective, what happens when we have a huge missile hit a car? And again, we have a car, it's not very big in the frame, we have some sort of reference, some sort of visual cue for the scale here. So when this hits, you know it's going to be big, right there. Yeah, that's a good one. And look at the debris here. Look at the fact that we actually have some refraction happening right here. The heat in the air is heating up the moisture, and we actually have this crazy distortion of the clouds behind that debris. So that's kind of crazy. I've actually never noticed that before until recording, but you actually do have a bit of refraction trailing behind this debris. And again, is this debris causing all of this smoke down here? Probably not. It's probably pulling that from the main plume. But anyway, I wanted to point out in this reference in particular, notice how the mushroom shapes evolve over time. They're going to kind of spin into themselves, right? Some areas are going to go down, some areas are going to go up. Sometimes the shapes come from inside of the fireball, sometimes they dive back into the cloud. So look at that. It's very interesting. It's almost like a lot of this evolving comes from within the cloud, right? And how everything's kind of just spinning around. Again, look at that area down there. Notice how it's going downwards. Here, I'll back up a little bit so you can see it. Keep your eye over here. Notice how it's going to wrap itself into that plume. We're going to figure out how to get that effect, and there's a cool little hack I know on how to get that working, but this will add a lot of realism to the evolution of that smoke plume. I'd like to point out the debris and how in this particular example, it's actually a main driving factor for the shapes we see in the explosion. So as this goes down, we have, again, a little fireball. It actually goes away pretty quickly. We have the dust spheres come out, and then watch what happens after the dust spheres. Then we have all of our little debris show up on the scene. Look at all those tiny guys. Now they're going out, and they create this interesting sort of raining down effect. So again, first we have the fireball, then we have the spheres, and then after the spheres, we have debris coming out right here. It's good to note that order of things because we'll need to offset all those various effects to get it to feel right. And in this last piece of reference footage, I want to try to blow your mind and let you know that pretty much every tutorial you've seen about pyro in Houdini has been sourced completely wrong, okay? This is mind-blowing, okay? Ask yourself this. When we see all of that smoke, see the black smoke, see how it was a black ground, and maybe we have some whites over here, and stop to ask yourself, okay, where did all of that come from? Did it come from the missile? Did it come from a sphere that was hovering above that ground? No. All of that smoke came from the ground. And yet, why is it that almost every single Houdini pyro situation never sources from the ground? That's where the dirt comes from. That's where all this stuff is coming from. And yet I rarely see Houdini artists sourcing their pyro from the ground. That is kind of mind-blowing once I realized that. So again, looking at this reference, you guys, it's so important because that's what's going to take your stuff to the next level. Making these observations, trying to think a little bit deeper about things. If you take the time to explore what you're actually seeing here in the real world and forgetting everything you already know or what other Houdini artists have tried to teach you, that's when you can find interesting, unique opportunities to make your stuff stand out from everyone else's. Based on the reference we just saw, we can use that to inform both what needs to happen in our scene, as well as a rough outline or a strategy of how we might try to go about this in Houdini. So in the next video, let's do just that.